Welcome one all, my name is Tawess and today we are going to continue painting the Pumpkinhead Atlas we started last episode. And well, I was kind of out of ideas what to do. So I decided to take this moment in time to experiment with a new painting recipe for leather that I was working on. So we're going to start off with some werewolf fur, which is a sort of muted creamy brown. I know I'm using the word a lot, creamy. But anyway, the whole idea here is to get a good solid base coat. Thin layers as usual, water it down about, hard to say actually, about a brushful in this case, to get it to go into the cracks and crevices on this thing. Because I wanted this to be the mostly base layer. Maybe a little bit of black here and there, but mostly I wanted it to be the brown base layer. It's going to work up from that. I was at first thinking of making this a skeleton armor, but it's a bit too chunky to work as a skeleton, you know. So, leather it is instead. Now, as you can see, I got started on the shoulder pad and was like, this is going great. Looks up at the camera, realize I forgot to push play or record. So, yeah. This is done by mixing werewolf fur, cobalt skinned, mainly, with some banshee brown added in at the end to really make the highlights pop. And this is ish wet blending. It's not really wet blending per se, it's not using that much paint, but it is the same idea behind wet blending, which basically uses the colors to mix and blend them into each other, giving you a smooth gradient from a dark to a bright. And since this is pretty much what I was testing with this video, and also I'm terribly sorry for the focus. I realized too late I was carrying the camera slightly too close, and yeah, it did not want to focus properly. But still, basically you can still see the gist of the idea anyway. Wet brush, decent amount of paint, apply it, work it around with the brush, make sure you almost massage it in. No sharp quick motions, but slow and rather fluid motions. And the great thing with this technique is that it does not necessarily mean you have to be all too exact. You can continue to push and tweak and add and remove for a fairly long time, even with these paints, because they're not thick paints exactly. This is the core idea behind blending anyway. In this way you push and pull the color mix together. Now, for the outer edges, I do add a bit of banshee brown. Banshee brown is sort of, it's hard to describe as a color. I used to be good at colors, trust me. You don't have to trust me, but it's a very bright, very beige, almost, it's a cold beige, a pale cold beige. Meaning that works very well with these saturated browns to bring the lightness up. And I use this mostly on the edges to define where the light will be catching. I'm mostly thinking that light comes straight up above. At least that's the idea. Meaning that there should be more brightness on top, and then everything that is under shadow or in shadow should be darker. And since this I'm making is mostly metallic, I still had an idea of making things soft shadows, not sharp shadows, because bouncing light and all that. So that was the idea anyway. And I think I hit it fairly much spot on. At least at the upper arm. The lower arm then went a bit wonky because there's a lack of detail in the lower arm. Upper arm, great detail. Lower arm, not so much detail. And I realized this first one was actually doing painting on it, that there was not much detail in that lower arm. So, you know, it is what it is. We have to live with it. But yeah, the method is still the same. Apply a slightly lighter shade of color, work it into an even lighter shade of color, go back in with a darker shade and massage that in to get the dark end of it. Go back and forth until you're happy. That is pretty much all there is to it. Now for a moment I was tempted to paint the entire mech this way, but I realized it would start to look weird after a while. So yeah, basically the idea here was to finish up the arm and then let it dry and see what we're going to do next. Because at this point I didn't really have a plan. There was loose ideas, but there was really no plan. So I decided to just wrap the arm up and then let that set, and then yeah, come back to that later. Also, it's worth noting that I am currently painting this over the contrast paint through an airbrush, and it has been sitting for about 2 days, and there's no reactivation at all, so that's good. Not contrast, speed paint. Still, the speed paint, the black speed paint. Now, for the rest of the mech, I decided to do an armor paint job, and this meant dry brushing silver. Gunmetal for dark, solid start, and then finishing it off with shining silver where the light hits. And to get the same idea of light coming from top, we're brushing up and down, top to bottom. Not sideways, nothing, or a bit of the sideways, but mostly not sideways. Top to bottom. Because that way we get a nice, solid sensation of light hitting it. Now to top that off, we take some shining silver and hit all the places they're supposed to be really exposed. Like the top of the chest, the shoulders, some part of the legs, the arm, all of that. And of course we paint the weapon in silver too. Now this is then going to get hit with a diluted speed paint. In this case we're going with Slaughter Red, I think so. Yeah, Slaughter Red. Yeah, fairly diluted Slaughter Red, just to still have the silver shining through. And this technique I picked up some time back by working with contrast paints on large scale models. Diorama, like 78 millimeters. And I wanted to make a lacquered armor, and I found that the silver and then a contrast paint or speed paint over that, or any kind of ink actually, but the more pigment the better. Then we do that, and then you hit that with a bit of gloss varnish, and it looks like lacquered armor. And that was the idea we're going for here. So finishing this up is actually hitting it with a coat of gloss varnish, just to make sure that we get the really popping. Also the fact that the Armor Painter speed paint dries dull, very matte finish. Unlike some other paints, it's very matte finish. So we hit everything with a nice gloss varnish to make it look like a really popping lacquered armor. I mean, that is pretty much it for this model. I didn't really have a concept for this one. It was just like I started off with the pumpkin head and was like, we've got to do something more with it. We can't just leave it with a pumpkin head. And we're going to come up with the turntable. I did not get the Shadow Vault box. They'll probably come Monday. If it comes Monday, we will paint a model next week. Until then, stay safe, be kind, and do play fair. Bye.